On this episode, we look at cities and drugs and leaving the church. Good? Bad? Find out on this episode of Unscripted.
Welcome back to Unscripted with Shawn Boonstra.
And Justin Kim.
That's Justin Kim. I'm Shawn Boonstra. We should just introduce each other next time, just confuse things up a little bit.
Didn't we? Yeah, we did. We just did that.
Yeah, we did. Anyway, hey, welcome back. This is, as I've often said, privately once on air, this is the finest moment in internet television. I don't care what you find on YouTube. I know you could watch ancient aliens, or you could watch, Sasquatch videos and that kind of stuff. The Sasquatch videos, okay, I have seen one or two of those because I'm from Sasquatch country.
From Canada.
Yeah, from Canada. We had Sasquatch there. And now as I get older, some of the people who know me are suspecting that Sasquatch might be real. It's just me getting hairier as I age. It's like I'm way past the moment where I can take my shirt off at the beach because
TMI.
Yeah, Sasquatch is here.
Total member involvement.
Hey, what do we got going on? We are still in March, and we've got some things to talk about today from the March edition. We're still looking at, and again, folks, really, subscribe. It's not expensive. This is the World Journal of the Church. Kids View comes in there for your kids. It's in there. And one of the things that's in the March edition is Shawn Brace's article on city living. And I found this one fascinating, Justin, because in many parts of the world, we are well past 80% urban. Right? I grew up in an itty-bitty town, 4,500, and I thought that's what a real city looked like. 4,500 people. It was a 10-hour drive to an international airport. 10 hours. Now, I'm from Canada. Canada is massive. I had relatives from the Netherlands call my parents when I was a kid saying, hey, we're landing in Calgary. Can you run to the airport and pick us up when we land? And we said, that's 10 hours away. And they're like, no, that's not 10 hours away. We can see on the map you're like just a few towns over. No concept of how rural it was. So this fascinated me. I never really saw a real city probably until 1980. Well, I flew from Edmonton, I guess, and then I went to Amsterdam. There's my first real.
And then that was your first city that you saw.
Yeah, and I saw things in
Edmonton's
Amsterdam
a real
that
city. No?
What's that?
Edmonton's a real city.
Yeah, it is. I left from Edmonton, so I saw that in the
Okay.
same trip, and then went to Amsterdam, of all places for a kid to see first. Amsterdam, at least in the 1980s, still a little bit today, was probably, sorry Dutch relatives, a living example of why we should not be in cities, probably. Rough town, legalized drugs, prostitution. It kind of embodied many of the things that Christians have shunned in the city. And yet, I found Shawn's article really enlightening because while we don't love living in the city, guess where the people are, right? So what did you pull out of this one?
I did some research and looked at in 1900, about 13% of the world was living in cities.
13. Yeah. That's it.
That's Ellen White's time, and she's giving counsel on not to live in the cities because the cities was what the hotbed of immorality is the term that she uses, and the concentration of everything bad.
Disease.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in 1950, it rose to 29%. Something happened in 2007 where we went over the 50% mark.
That's the line? I'm going to write this down.
Yeah.
2007.
2007 is the date. And so I really appreciate Shawn Brace's article.
It's the other Shawn
Boonstra
B.
is the one
There's
that's
two
here.
of us. Shawn, I got your back. There's two of us.
So Shawn Brace says that we need to focus on the cities, and then so here's the tension. Here's the tension.
Yep.
Ellen White says stay out of the cities. The majority of the world is now living in the cities. What do we do, right? And then there's a new compilation that came out by the White Estate called Ministry to the Cities. And so when Ellen White's, the compilation came out called Country Living, people flocked to the country.
Right.
And that compilation, although correct, although totally we need to stay away from the cities, was a biased compilation that only took half of what Ellen White had to say about country living and city living. So Ministry to the Cities was a, what do they call it? A partner, a
complement.
Compilation.
Right.
To continue the topic.
There's got to be one word we could mash those together in a complementation.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. And it continues, and there's a lot. She actually writes more about work that we need to do in the cities and ministry in the cities more than she writes about living in the country. So I guess the short point is what I'm trying to get is that some people think, hey, you're not following Ellen White's counsel, you're being disobedient, you're taking a liberal interpretation of her writings. If you do a full comprehensive study of all of her writings, she does say go to the country, but she also says there's a work to be done in the cities. And with the majority of the world living in the cities, shouldn't the Adventist Church do all this? We want to usher in the coming of Jesus, right? We don't want to just live in the country and just wait for Jesus and have all the people in the city to burn. We have to have a burden and a work for those living in the urban areas.
And I find this very interesting. She did say, right, Shawn brings out the quote from 1899, as did Enoch, we must work in the cities but not dwell in them. And I get that. The older I get, the quieter I like it. I grew up in a tiny place. I love the wilderness if I had a choice. But then there's also this idea that we're being, well, how do I say this? We're being holier. I'm using the word
by living in the country.
By living in the country and removing ourselves from that. But the temptation is this, and I get it. If you've got kids, yeah, raise them in the country.
Sure.
I understand. Get them away from those influences. Unfortunately, the city is now imported everywhere. I've worked among the Inuit at the North Pole, way up north, and the government piped in high-speed internet. And so these Inuit kids that knew nothing but living on the land are now watching Hollywood movies, and they're starting to experience the same problems that happen in the city anyway.
Yeah.
So in some ways, the city has now gone everywhere, absolutely everywhere. The other thing that can happen is that we remove ourselves to the country, and we fall into the same temptation that some of the monks did in the 2nd and 3rd centuries of Christianity. I'm going to be holy. I'm going to remove myself from the people, live in the desert monks, the ascetics. Unfortunately, when they got out there, here's what they discovered, is that they had the same problems they had when they lived in the city, because your worst enemy is actually you.
Self.
Right? The devil can show up there as well, and it's not just the influence of others that's taking you down. It's largely you that's taking you down. And again, I'm not going to disparage it. I would love to live in the country, and yet, 85, I don't have the exact number, you did some homework, but 80-some% of us are now living in urban centers, completely removed from the land, and that's who we need to win. And I'm not convinced it's enough to show up once in a while, hand out some literature, and then drive back out into the country, because as we've mentioned on this show, soul winning is relationship. So if I'm going to do evangelism in a city in the past, I would look at that city, somewhere in the world, whatever that city would be, Bangalore, India, whatever, I would go and live there. A month isn't really enough, but I want more than nothing. I will go and live there ahead of time, long enough to get maybe the flavor of how people have to live in that city, how they get to work, what kinds of influences, what the city's like, what kind of crime they're dealing with, what the biggest issues they live with are, and immerse myself in it for
live in
a
their
while.
shoes, be incarnated with them, in them,
And I don't go stay in an American hotel, and I go live among people. That's what Jesus did. He came and lived among us.
Take the risk and eat the street food.
I do have limits.
But it's getting your feet dirty and abiding with Him, and I think that's the core of what Shawn's getting at.
Yeah.
The irony is, back in American history, you had all these Northerners coming down to the South, Northern city folk coming down to rural South, and they're trying to
urbanize it.
Urbanize it, and they said, hey, you can't just kind of come here and tell us what to do. You got to live amongst us. You got to be one of us. You got to speak like us. And the most successful ones actually lived amongst them, and they did do what they had to do. Similar, we're kind of advocating for the opposite. We need to not be of the city, not be, but we got to be in the city and understand what it is that what are their ups, what are their downs, what are their celebrations, what are they depressed about, and live with them.
Yeah, you better believe it, because our job as preachers, as believers, is to take what's in the Scripture and make it understandable to people in the context that they live in. People would call it exegeting. Go back and find out what the author really meant. That's the exegesis process. Yeah. What did John really mean when he wrote X? But then you got to think, how could I convey that same concept now to people who live in Tokyo?
Right.
Where Christianity is a vast minority and the culture is. So here's what I found interesting, and I don't want to give the whole article away because Shawn did a really good job of this. You want to get your March edition of the review. He gives the story of S.N. Haskell. Now remember, Ellen White writes be like Enoch, work in the city, don't live in there, in 1899. 2 years later, in 1901, S.N. Haskell and Hetty, his wife, moved to New York. It's 2 years later.
New York
and
City.
what she doesn't do is saying, what are you doing living in the city? She never says that. As a matter of fact, there's a quote here. I don't want to give it all away. You need to read this. Your work in New York has been started in right lines. You are to make in New York a center for missionary effort. Yeah. So it's balance. Again,
yeah, and this number, at least in my research, you said 80%. Is that in North America?
I think globally we are, and again, this isn't science. Don't hold me to the fire on this. But globally, humanity is drifting into larger and larger metropolises.
For sure.
And 80-some% probably here in North America. I suspect that's starting to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking on the internet, and in 2020, it was 56% of the world population was living in cities.
56. Okay.
And it was projected by 2050 to be 2/3, 66% would be living in cities. Globally. And there's a lot of empty spaces out there too, but these global metropolises are growing, and if that's where the majority of souls are at, that behooves us to go where souls are at and to win them for Jesus.
Yeah. And again, it's not the cities themselves that are the issue. After all, God is holding out the promise of a city. He's holding out
that's right.
But it's cities as human beings.
Yeah, and I appreciate the balance of this this article, because he's advocating for keeping the principles of Ellen White, but adapting them to modern time. How do we keep the principle and still be faithful to that principle? But how do we function in according to our ecclesiology? Jesus has to come on when the gospel is preached to the ends of the world, and so that includes cities as well.
Yeah, it does. So read it. I mean, pray about it. Come to your conclusions. But this is worth reading. All right. Speaking of problems you find in the city, I've recently moved from Colorado, which was the first state in the United States to legalize marijuana.
Yeah.
And it's still a federal crime, I understand, in America, but state by state, that war has been lost. And so we have online an article called Beyond the Haze. And it's Belinda Kramer wrote this for us, talking about marijuana, weed, which has become an interesting problem because as it's legalized, some people are thinking, no, it's not that big of a deal. It's herbal after all, and even healthy and natural.
Organic and all that stuff, yeah.
I've seen the worst arguments. There's an expression in Hebrew or Aramaic, I can't remember which language. In the Old Testament, the phrase cannabosum shows up, and people see cannabis. Abraham brought cannabis with him when No, he did not. He did not bring cannabis with him.
We call that eisegesis in theology.
Well, look at that.
Look it up.
Look at that. Hey, Andrews Theological Seminary, look at that. We used exegesis and eisegesis in the same discussion.
What I appreciate about this article is that the Adventist Review goes into theology, into Bible study, into church structure and news, but it also looks at health principles, because it's not just about living healthier and living longer, but how to treat the body as a temple, and how the body impacts the spirit, and the spirit impacts the mind, and this is all Adventist theology. And we look at health, and a current health problem that we have is not just marijuana, but it's this whole vaping culture that includes marijuana. And what does the church believe? What does the Bible, what do we believe regarding this practice?
I think this one was very timely, very good. I don't know what's going on in the rest of the world. Canada has federally legalized marijuana and so on, but it's being sold as healthy. And I even see weed companies making commercials now saying, look, drinking's bad for you. We all know that. Look at the car accidents. Look at the alcoholics. We have a healthy alternative. That's the way they're selling it.
Yeah.
We'll sell you some gummies and you can have a party without a hangover. That's what they're telling people. But very thankful to Belinda. She points out some very serious issues that it's still not good for you. And she talks about the reasons people turn to vaping or marijuana. Peer pressure, that's the age-old one.
Which this practice, it's being targeted to young people.
Always.
It always has, but there's a certain now curiosity. I think the upcoming generation, they're eschewing alcohol, and they're eschewing some of the harder drugs, and they are getting into more of the recreational stuff because that's, like you said, it's healthier. There's no negative effects, quote unquote. So this is something that they can, relieve stress through.
No, exactly. Relief stress. And she brings this out as one of the reasons people turn to it, stress and escape. And actually, Justin, here's where I find one of the key dangers that happens. People who smoke some weed or vape, do they find some relief from stress? Yeah, sure, because it just takes the edge off of everything and so on. But the question I want people to consider is, what are you doing? What are you medicating? You're self-medicating and you're taking the edge off of stress. Have you solved the problem ultimately, or have you just masked it until the next time it crops up? In many ways, we turn to substance abuse as a way to not deal with what needs to be dealt with. And I think that goes beyond just, say, personal emotional issues to sin itself. Alcohol, the standby party drug for the last generation, lowers inhibitions. You will do things that you wouldn't normally do on alcohol. And so then the question I've got is, okay, weed takes the edge off of things, but does it also take the edge off of your conscience? Ultimately, God speaks to every heart. He's trying to get our attention. He's got the ultimate solution. Peace that passes understanding is what is promised in Scripture. And by smoking a doobie, smoking a blunt, don't ask me how I know all those words, but...
What is that, Shawn?
Yeah, what is that, Shawn? Everybody else knows exactly what I'm talking about. Are you dulling your conscience? Are you kicking down the road what needs to be dealt with between not just you and others, but maybe you and God? Maybe you and God. And I get it, life is painful, but maybe there are alternatives that don't damage the mind. Have you ever I had friends who smoked way too much weed when they were younger, and you saw it after a few years, everything was slow motion. I mean, they were laid back, they were relaxed, but they couldn't really function the way God designed us to anymore. Just everything was in slow motion.
What I appreciate about this article was her emphasis on independence and dependence. And, you, like you said, the stress is relieved temporarily, but you are dependent. And is there another option where you can have the same relief of stress, same relief of anxiety, but still maintain your independence? And it's the alternative. And I like the way it's concluded that with all that Adventism has to offer, we are to showcase it with grace, and we shouldn't, condemn people. But how do we talk to our young people and talk about the principles of independence and dependence and some of these things?
Yeah, I'm glad she touches on this stuff too. She said a few things: approach with love, not condemnation.
Yeah.
And I've been guilty of doing it the wrong way many times. When I'm offering suggestions for relating to people, or maybe working among people that you're witnessing to, I'll assure you this: I've done it the wrong way 1,000 times. That's how I know that the wrong way doesn't work.
Yeah.
Most people don't need a lecture. I don't care if it's been legalized, for example. Most people know in their haze, as they light the third joint of the day, they don't need a lecture. They know this is not the best option. It's what they've learned to do to cope with life, but they don't need a lecture at that point. They just don't.
Yeah, the opposite of addiction is connection. And so I've noticed that when you connect with people, often when people are addicted and we would condemn them and we want them to be isolated away from everyone, but that's the worst thing you can do for an addict. But connection is, hey, let's connect. What is it that's stressing you out so much? And commiserating and showing compassion on that level, and then bypassing the whole chemical dependency thing. They may not be even addicted. This may be just a recreational thing, but addressing the core of it. And we're not talking about marijuana. We're not talking about cocaine. It could be just anything that we're addicted to.
That we self-medicate with.
Totally, and that's
Overeating,
all
shopping,
of us.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about marijuana, but how many of us are just doom scrolling on our phones, or addicted to email, addicted to whatever your choice of drug is.
Okay, I doom scroll. I have done that one.
All of us. It satisfies a certain dopamine need that we have, and the Lord wants to get to that point in all of us. And I appreciate the depth of the diagnosis that she has.
You've got young kids at home still, so let me ask this in the context of some of the things Belinda writes, and as a parent, my kids are grown and gone, and I have memories of how to relate to this, but your kids are growing up in a world where you can't isolate them forever. And so I'm sure you encourage them to make friends with kids. But where do you start to draw the lines? These kids have weed in their home, they have this. And as a parent, how do you teach your kids to relate to people and love them, but still shelter them or protect them?
Hey, that's crazy because I just lectured to them this morning about this on the way to school. And I said, hey, mommy and daddy knows that there's different types of families out there. There's some families that want to expose their kids to everything bad out there.
Right.
There's no limits. And you know what, guys? Mom and dad, we're afraid of that because you get into bad stuff and you'll be bad, and we don't want you to be bad. There's other families that protect you from all the bad stuff and just completely put you in a bubble of the good stuff. And what happens is because they've never experienced the bad stuff, and when they're out in the world, they don't know what this bad stuff is, and they experience it, and they don't think for themselves, and they stumble upon it. Then they get into the bad stuff, and then they're bad.
Yeah.
What we want to do is, in a protected environment, show you what is bad and what is good, in a middle stage, and that's up to our judgment. And if that is that unfair, it's totally unfair. But mom and dad have that right. And we say, hey, this is bad, this is good, and to develop skills in you so that you know and discern what's good and bad. Not just experience that which is good, but discern. And that is a frustrating process.
Sure.
It's a long process.
It is, and it is frustrating because kids can't see why you might know more.
They don't see the big turn, the big picture, long term.
No, and there comes a point, I mean, it is concerning when you consider the fact that for boys in particular, until you're about 25, you have not yet congealed your ability to consider long-term consequences. So if I look back on my pre-25 years, it's like, oh, no wonder. I was taking all these foolish risks because you can't see yourself at 50 paying the price for it. So God puts parents...
Neurologically, I believe from ages 14 to 19, and then depending on boys, your prefrontal cortex, which is in charge of your executive function, shuts down.
Yeah.
So if hey, let's do something stupid, illegal, deadly, and we might die, let's do it. I mean, that's the answer.
And weed causes damage there, which means that you don't ever sort of fully come out of that. One more that I want to draw our attention to. Again, we're talking the March issue of the review, and we're also talking about the online content, AdventistReview.org. If you're not subscribing to this YouTube feed, by the way, click it. We'll know if you did. We'll know if you didn't. You know, and then I'll send Justin over there to tell you about the good and the bad. But
you get the lecture.
You want to subscribe. But 7 reasons people don't join the church. This came from Shane Anderson at Pioneer Memorial Church.
Yeah, I appreciated this article.
Yeah, let's just touch on this because I want people to have to read it.
Yep.
But I just really appreciated this. I've spent a lifetime in evangelism, and I've seen far too many people visit the church and not quite join. And he does a lot of careful thinking here. And my favorite here is probably church culture is foreign to many seekers. That's his number 7.
So he actually counts down from 7 down, Yep.
And church culture is foreign. We don't know how weird we are. I often joke, we're God's peculiar people, and you have no idea how peculiar we are. I'm a convert. But that's 30-some years ago. And so I've become immersed and comfortable in Adventist culture.
You're one of us now.
I'm one of us. Although I have refused up to this point to move into an Adventist conclave. I've never done that because I don't want to lose that relationship that I have with my neighbors.
You have with the non.
To stop understanding what goes on. Just understand, we're a little weird. You know, we're odd. We worship on a different day. We eat differently.
We got these weird sausage thingies in our church. I call them salty erasers. I thought even as an Adventist, it's weird. They're like pink, and we have weird food, and we have weird names, Tuno instead of tuna, and everything is a different version of what the real thing is. It's
Bologna. I'll tell you what, in the first year I thought, okay, all of these, all you have to do is take the meat product and put no on the end, and that's our version.
Yeah, there you go.
Tuno, bologna, and then I thought non-alcoholic wine should be called wino.
Wino.
Yeah, there you go. So, but we are odd, and that's important to remember.
And it is a large. You need a large amount of energy to overcome that in the beginning.
Yeah, you do, and you also need somebody who just doesn't condemn, doesn't poke fun, doesn't reject. We get uncomfortable too.
Yes.
There's cognitive dissonance going in 2 different directions. Someone comes in and we don't know how to relate to them, but the same thing's happening in the other direction. And so do more listening than talking.
Yeah.
Love people. And if you don't love people, ask God to teach you to love people.
That's
and
number 6, number 4, number 3 that you just covered. relationship is a big part of it.
Yeah, it is.
And it could be that because we're such cerebral people, that we do kind of lack on some of the emotional intelligence components that
Here
we
are
need to
28 fundamental facts.
Right.
Accept them and you're an Adventist.
Right.
Except takes more than that. And we know, these are old studies dating back to the 80s, but we know that if somebody joins the Adventist Church or starts coming, and if they don't make 5 to 6 close friends in the first 4 or 5, 6 months, they're going to disappear. Most people to this day don't stop attending for doctrinal reasons. It's because, well, look at it this way. So many of them, they might lose their job. They're facing hostility at home because they became an Adventist and their family doesn't get it, and actually fights them a little bit. You know, puts some pork and beer on the table just to get at you, or plans things for Saturday just to get at you a little bit. That's what they're dealing with, and they don't need it from our end too. They just don't need it from our end too. They need 5 to 6 good friends. The reason they leave is that they didn't find acceptance in a new circle. They might be losing everything: friends, family, job.
Yeah.
And we have a matter of weeks to become that for these people. They're human beings who need love and relationships and acceptance and those kinds of things.
Oh, good stuff. All good stuff. I love number 2, that major life changes are a reason why people don't come to the church. And I just love that in the Adventist culture that we have kind of roadblocks, is that what it's called? Or these stages in life that we prepare for people in case that you have a major life change. The church is there, or I should say the church should be there, that when the kids are going off to college or marriage or first child, then when there's a major life change, the church should be there to help transition from one life change to another.
Yeah. I've had people coming to evangelistic meetings who had family members murdered in the middle of the meetings. And we just, you know, the best thing to do there, don't cluck your tongue, oh, I'll pray for you. You can do more than that. It's like, you know what, that's awful. Let me come with you to the funeral home. We'll help you plan a funeral. I know you don't have any money, so we'll take care of it. We will handle the funeral for you. Love these people. Become their new world and their new family. There's something about this. Shane just really checked a lot of boxes. You need to read this. Shane's article.
There's a number 1 reason, but we won't mention it because you should read it.
You should be reading it. But number 1 is big in the modern world. You need to read it. Shane Anderson, 7 Reasons People Don't Join the Church. So AdventistReview.org, you got to get there, read this, see what you think, try to apply it. Have a discussion in Sabbath school. Take 10 minutes to discuss how you could apply this in your church.
Let us know what happens in the comments in your Sabbath school discussion.
And we covered a lot today, didn't we? Living in the city, smoking weed, and loving people, right? 2 bads, 1 good. Love people, no weed, work in the cities, and go to AdventistReview.org. Don't forget, click that subscribe button below here. Honestly, it makes our day. Leave a few comments. Maybe in the comments this week, share something you've done or noticed that helped you incorporate new people into your fellowship.
Good. That's good.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye.
Thanks for joining us today for Unscripted. We invite you to check out all the other offerings from the Adventist Review online 24 hours a day at AdventistReview.org.